Elena Carter never expected her Tuesday afternoon to end with a date proposal from the coldest man in luxury architecture. Yet here she was, standing in the gleaming lobby of Cross & Co., her fingers clamped white around her portfolio. "Mr. Carter," the receptionist called out. "Mr. Cross will see you now." Elena straightened her slate gray dress, took a deep breath, and pushed through the heavy walnut doors. The corner office on the 43rd floor was far from welcoming. Floor-to-ceiling glass offered a sweeping view of Chicago. The furniture was minimal, but so luxurious, she suspected one of the leather chairs could cover 6 months of her office rent. Behind a granite desk sat Julian Cross, every bit as immaculate as the rumors claimed. At 38, he'd built a globally renowned architecture empire, famous for designing buildings as sharp and distant as his personality. His cool silver-gray eyes flicked over her as Elena approached. "Your proposal? Interesting," he said without preamble. "But I need more than interesting. I need convincing." Elena swallowed and took the seat across from him. "Mr. Cross, my firm specializes in brand strategy and corporate image transformation. And my image," he cut in, "needs saving after the employee lawsuit, I presume." She didn't flinch. "The public sees you as aloof, unfeeling. We need to reveal a different side, the man behind the glass towers. A real heart." Julian's laugh was dry. "You assume I have one?" "You do," she said firmly, locking eyes with him. "Some people just hide it better." Silence stretched until he suddenly stood. "There's a fundraising gala tomorrow night, hosted by the Innovative Architecture Society. My board's been pressuring me to attend, with someone who makes me seem human." He paused. "You want to prove your strategy works? Join me, as my girlfriend. One night." Elena blinked. "I came here to discuss business, not play PR theater. You'll have 5 hours to implement your strategy. In return, I'll consider your contract. Simple transaction." He shrugged, watching her closely. "Unless your confidence doesn't match your pitch." She knew a challenge when she heard one. This account could save her firm, especially after her former partner left, taking half their clients with him. But pretending to be Julian Cross's girlfriend, the same man who reportedly refused to send flowers to an assistant's funeral because it was sentimental waste, was another matter entirely. "Omni," she said, her tone sharpening. "Professional boundaries stay intact, and you give my proposal serious consideration." He nodded once. "Deal." As they shook hands, Elena was caught off guard by the warmth in his grip, for someone supposedly made of steel. Outside, her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Wear red. Power is the game, and I never lose." Elena narrowed her eyes, half annoyed, half intrigued. She typed back, "Neither do I." Easy, the game had begun. But neither of them yet knew. In matters of the heart, there are no winners. Only the brave who dare to risk it all. Elena's third-floor apartment in Chicago's West Loop wasn't large, but it was meticulously organized, much like the woman who lived in it. Tonight, though, it looked like a tornado had passed through. Dresses draped over chairs, heels scattered across the floor, and in the center of the chaos was Elena Carter, spinning in front of the mirror in a black cocktail dress she clearly wasn't convinced about. On the couch, Maya, her longtime best friend and colleague, watched with a mix of curiosity and mild horror. "Let me get this straight," Maya said, sipping her wine. "You're about to pretend to be Julian Cross's girlfriend?" Julian Cross, the ice king of modern architecture, just to land a branding contract? Elena didn't stop adjusting her dress. "It's not pretending. It's a live demonstration of my strategy, a real-time proof of concept." You know, there's an article online about how he once told employees not to laugh too loudly in the office because it disrupted efficiency? And you're walking into the biggest architecture gala of the year with that man? Elena opened her closet again, pulling out a red dress. "He texted me to wear red." Maya squinted. "And you're taking his fashion advice now? That doesn't sound like the Elena Carter I know." "This isn't about him," Elena replied, holding the dress up to the mirror. This is about image. Red is bold, it's memorable. If I'm going to convince a room full of elite architects that Julian Cross is emotionally accessible, every detail needs to work in my favor. Maya exhaled. And what if he actually has feelings? He doesn't, Elena replied too quickly. He approaches everything like a building, angular, calculated, and no room for unpredictability. At exactly 6:58 p.m. the next evening, a sleek black Lincoln pulled up outside Elena's building. The driver stepped out, polite and professional, and handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate sapphire bracelet. Elegant, understated. Attached was a handwritten note. Presence is part of the message. J.C. Delaney stared at it for a moment, then slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, confused, intrigued, slightly unnerved. When the car pulled up in front of the Astoria Hotel, the venue for the fundraiser, it wasn't the driver who opened her door. It was Julian himself. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo. The lobby's warm lighting glinted off his silver cufflinks. Their eyes met, and for a fraction of a second, his perfectly neutral expression flickered. Something, almost human. "You followed instructions," he said, gaze dropping briefly to the bracelet. "Don't get used to it," Elena replied, adjusting her clutch. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but something close. "Shall we begin our performance, Miss Carter?" She took his arm. "Lead the way, Mr. Cross." Neither noticed the cameras clicking steadily behind them. The grand ballroom of the Astoria Hotel shimmered under crystal chandeliers. Marble pillars, hand-painted ceilings, and the soft notes of a live string quartet filled the space with elegant detachment. Elena entered on Julian's arm, his hand resting gently at the small of her back. Not too intimate, but just enough to stake a quiet claim in the eyes of the crowd. "Remember," he leaned down, voice barely above the music. "Don't show fear. These people can smell pretense, like blood in the water." Elena didn't flinch. "I know how to read a room, Mr. Cross. That's why you brought me, remember?" Julian glanced sideways, a flicker of amusement in his gaze. "Impress me, then." She didn't need to be told twice. Elena moved through the room like a seasoned diplomat. She chatted with industry leaders, laughed with investors, and asked pointed, thoughtful questions that left even the most aloof designers momentarily intrigued. At each table, Julian remained close, sometimes silent, sometimes dryly witty, but always watching her. Not like a strategist monitoring success, like a man watching something he couldn't quite explain. "Julian, you've been hiding her," said a silver-haired man approaching with a champagne flute. "I've tried to drag you to events like this all year, and now you show up with a woman who actually smiles?" Julian inclined his head slightly. "Walter Kensington, chairman of Cross & Co.," he murmured to Elena. "Pleasure to meet you," she said, shaking Walter's hand. "Where on earth have you been hiding her?" Walter grinned. "And how did you convince such a charming woman to spend an evening with you?" Elena responded smoothly before Julian could. "Mr. Cross is surprisingly engaging if you invest the time to look deeper. He's just selective about who gets to see that side." Walter let out a booming laugh. "Ah, you're special. I haven't seen this man smile in a decade, and now, well." Julian's arm subtly tightened around Elena's waist, a silent anchor, or maybe a boundary he didn't want her crossing. An hour later, the dinner service began. Elena and Julian sat side by side at the head table. Candlelight flickered between them, casting soft shadows across fine china and crystal. "You haven't touched your food," she said softly. "These events aren't about eating," he replied, eyes still fixed ahead. "They're about performing." Elena sipped her water. "We all perform, but you're better at it than most." He turned his head. "Psychological profiling wasn't part of our deal." "Neither was a sapphire bracelet," she replied, gently touching her wrist. A pause. Not tense, just full. The string quartet shifted tones. A waltz began to play, delicate and deliberate. Julian stood and extended a hand. "We should dance." Elena hesitated. Dancing meant closeness. and closeness was dangerous. Not physically, but emotionally. "Unless you're afraid," he challenged, quiet but direct. She placed her hand in his. "I don't do fear." As they stepped onto the floor, the ballroom seemed to slow. Julian guided her with unexpected ease, strong, precise, and utterly in control. "You're full of surprises," Elena said, keeping her gaze on his shoulder. "My mother insisted," he murmured. "Said social skills are strategic advantages." "Is that all they are to you? Advantages?" He met her eyes. "Until recently, yes." No more words, just movement, light, and the growing realization that their bodies were too in sync for this to be pretend. When the music ended, Julian held her hand a moment too long. A camera flashed nearby. Elena offered a soft smile. "Looks like we'll be in tomorrow's press." "Good," Julian said, unreadable. "Phase 1 complete." Elena turned to him. "What exactly is your game, Julian?" His smile faded slowly. "Who said I'm playing one?" The morning after the gala, Elena woke in a daze, somewhere between reality and dream. She could still feel the echo of Julian's hand on hers, the look in his eyes as they danced, the way he said, "Who said I'm playing?" She arrived at the office early, though focus remained elusive. While reviewing budget sheets, her phone buzzed. "Julian Cross, can you meet me in 20 minutes? Design studio, 9th floor." She stared at the screen, heart slowing. "I'm free," she replied. Julian stood in warm light among suspended sketches and architectural models. His back was to her, but his voice was crisp. "You came." "Still a potential client," she said evenly. "I have an obligation to hear your proposal." He turned. No suit today, just a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, steel watch hanging loose at his wrist. And somehow, that made him more dangerous. "I have a proposal," he said, eyes fixed on her. "Extend this relationship. Publicly. 6 weeks. Not just one evening. A campaign." Elena arched a brow. "A campaign?" "You and me. A couple. We maintain the momentum. Positive press continues. You get an exclusive branding contract. And after 6 weeks, we part ways. Cordially. Blame it on schedules. No damage. No scandal." She crossed her arms. "You're asking me to fake date you for 6 weeks?" "Not fake," he corrected. "Just emotionally controlled collaboration." She didn't respond. Logic told her this was gold, but emotion whispered, "This is thin ice." "There are conditions," she said. 1, absolute honesty behind closed doors, no games." "Agreed." 2, my firm keeps the contract, regardless of how the relationship ends." "Of course." 3, she hesitated. "We define physical boundaries. Hand-holding, brief hugs, maybe a kiss on the cheek. Nothing excessive." Julian tilted his head. "That won't be convincing. We're professionals, not actors." He stepped closer. "Then let's establish comfort now, to avoid awkwardness later." "Julian, I don't think—" Before she could finish, he was in front of her, one hand at her waist. And he kissed her. Not harshly, not greedily, just precisely, like a blueprint he'd already drafted. And what stunned her wasn't the precision, it was the heat. There was something honest in it, something uncalculated, buried under practiced elegance. When he pulled back, his expression wasn't unreadable for once. It was uncertain. "There," he said quietly, baseline established. Elena took a moment before replying. "That wasn't part of the terms. Call it negotiation." He stepped back, gaze still steady. A shutter clicked. One of the studio assistants passed by with the camera, unaware of the moment captured. Julian instinctively turned. Elena smiled faintly. "See? Parks aren't the only places for spontaneous authenticity." Julian looked at her, not with assessment this time, but something close to respect. "You're better at this than I expected." "You've barely scratched the surface," she replied, her pulse still racing from a kiss that wasn't supposed to matter, but very much did. 3 weeks had passed since Elena and Julian had struck their strategic arrangement. They had attended 7 public events together, from art exhibits to high-end charity dinners. Every time, the press ate it up. Photos of Julian pulling out Elena's chair, of Elena laughing at something he whispered, of their fingers laced as they crossed the red carpet. The campaign was flawless. And that was the problem, because Elena no longer knew what was real. Tonight, they were preparing for a charity auction supporting architecture scholarships. Elena stood before the mirror in Julian's penthouse, adjusting her pearl earrings. Behind her, Julian emerged from the bedroom, tie still undone. "The dress will silence the entire room," he said, gaze lingering. She turned, smirking. "A compliment? I should record this?" He stepped closer, tying his tie without breaking eye contact. Not a compliment, an observation. He paused. "You look real." She blinked. "What do you mean? This time, you're not performing." She wanted to laugh it off, but something about his tone stopped her. Maybe he was right. Maybe the boundaries they'd drawn weeks ago now only lived on paper. Last week, when Julian won a humanitarian design award, he kissed her, unscripted, in front of the board. No cameras, no PR moment. They never talked about it. She adjusted the silk strap of her gown. Maybe I'm just getting better at playing the part. Julian looked at her with something unreadable, then turned to retrieve his jacket. The auction was packed. Once again, they were the center of attention. Elena smiled on cue. Julian's gaze was intense, but softer, what the media now called a miraculous transformation. When a journalist asked, "What's the secret behind your connection?" Elena was about to answer when Julian spoke first. "She saw something I buried for years," he said, eyes fixed on hers, "and made me wonder why I ever buried it." No script had written that line. No PR manager coached that gaze. Elena barely remembered what she said afterward, but for the rest of the evening, Julian's hand never left the small of her back. Back at the penthouse, Elena slipped off her heels and walked barefoot across the polished floor. Julian poured them wine. She waved it away. "I can't keep doing this." He paused. "Doing what?" "This." She gestured between them. "This arrangement. It's slipping out of my hands." Julian stepped closer. "You're feeling lost?" "No, I'm feeling real," he set the glass down. "I'm not confused, Elena. I know what I'm doing." "Then why did you introduce me to your sister last week?" Silence. "Why is my laptop still here? Why is the coffee in your kitchen made just the way I like it?" Julian came closer, voice low. "You know I don't do emotions well. I live by structure, but with you?" He stopped. "I forgot the structure." She let out a short, breathy laugh. More nervous than amused. "We have 3 weeks left. Or maybe we don't need a deadline." She shook her head, looking down. "I don't know if what I feel is real, or if I'm just swept up in the story I helped create." Julian gently touched her hand. "Elena, I don't think this is fiction anymore. Not from my side." She looked at him, breath caught between logic and longing, the weight of a question pressing against her chest. "Can I dare to believe this time?" Elena showed up at Cross & Co. unannounced on a sky-gray afternoon. Not to talk contracts, not to plan their next public appearance. She came to stop it. Julian was in the private conference room, reviewing a blueprint for a new community center in Detroit. When she entered, he looked up briefly, then fully, as he read her expression. "Elena, we need to talk." He gestured for his assistant to leave. The door closed. Silence took over like a third presence in the room. "I can't keep doing this," she said, voice too even to be natural. Julian didn't look away. "What do you mean?" "This arrangement," she pointed to the space between them, "it's not an arrangement anymore. I'm losing control of my emotions, and I think you are too." He stood slowly, not retreating. "No, I'm not in control anymore." Elena gave a small, pained laugh. "I was the one who set the boundaries, created the conditions, defined the space, and I was the first to break every single one. Then don't call it failure, he said softly. Call it change. Julian, you introduced me to your family. I stayed at your penthouse 3 times last week and couldn't remember if it was for convenience or comfort. Your sister texted me to ask which wine I liked for the holidays. His expression softened. I didn't expect to feel this way. I thought I could manage it all, but then you weren't what I expected. She stepped closer, but didn't touch him. We have 2 weeks left. What if I want to cancel the countdown? Julian's voice was barely a whisper. What if I don't want it to end? Elena turned away. You told me emotions were irrational, inefficient. I believed you. I believed it so much, I started closing mine off too. She paused, biting her lip. But I can't anymore. Then let me say what I haven't dared for 3 weeks, Julian said, stepping toward her. I care about you. Not because of a deal, not because of image, but because I like who I am around you. She didn't reply. Her eyes shimmered. But if you don't feel the same, I won't hold you to anything. I respect your choice. Some voice in her head screamed, run, stay safe. But her heart, weary of walls, said nothing. You've broken every rule we set, she whispered. And I'll keep breaking them, he said, if it means I get to keep you. Elena lifted her chin, met his gaze. No stage, no cameras, just them. I need time, she said. I'll wait, Julian answered gently, but not as part of any strategy. This time, I'm waiting for real. She nodded once, then turned and walked out. She didn't know what waited on the other side of this choice, but for the first time, she wasn't trying to control it. 2 days had passed since that conversation, but the distance between them wasn't measured in time. It was in silence. A silence that wasn't quite an ending, but not a beginning either. Then, on Thursday evening, an invitation to the National Architecture Fund Gala arrived in both their inboxes. A reminder that if anything remained unresolved, tonight would be the moment to decide. The Astoria Hotel shimmered with light, just like the night they first met. But this time, Elena stepped out of a taxi, alone. She had declined Julian's offer to arrive together. I'll come separately, she texted. I need to walk in alone tonight. She wore a simple black high-neck dress, elegant, understated. On her wrist, the sapphire bracelet glinted softly, the first artifact of their act. But tonight, she wore it not for strategy, but because without it she would have felt unfinished, exposed, like she was walking into battle without armor. Inside the hotel, her heart pounded as she crossed the marble lobby. Questions spun through her mind. If I came to end this, why did I wear my best dress? Why am I still thinking about the way he looks when no one's watching? Elena, she turned. Julian stood behind her, in the same tuxedo he always wore. But tonight, something in his face was different. Not guarded, not cold, just real. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure either, she admitted. Before you say anything, Julian said, voice low, I want to show you something. He extended his hand. After a beat, Elena placed hers in it. They didn't walk into the ballroom. Instead, Julian led her to the top floor, the penthouse suite reserved for high-profile guests. The space was empty, except for a long table covered in newspapers, photos, printouts, and neatly handwritten notes. Elena approached slowly. The articles were all recent. Julian Cross, the unexpected philanthropist, how one woman changed the face of a legend. Beneath them were note cards, scrawled in careful handwriting. She drinks black coffee, but never after 4 p.m. She smiles when someone mentions her hometown. Ask about her father, it still hurts. Elena turned, voice unsteady. What is all this? At first, Julian said, I told myself it was research. For the performance. But then I started noticing things no one else would see. Things that had nothing to do with PR. Just you. He stepped closer, eyes solemn. You think I don't care. But this is how I care. Not with flowers, not with pretty speeches, but with attention, with remembering. Elena inhaled, willing herself not to cry. Why? Because I knew that if I didn't, I'd lose something real. For the first time, I wasn't building something from steel and glass. I was building something from feeling. Julian paused. But you don't owe me anything. If you want to walk away tonight and file this under professional experience, I won't stop you. No pleas, no drama. Elena looked down at the bracelet on her wrist. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a story of caution turned curiosity, of lines crossed 1 inch at a time, and everything she'd pushed down for weeks crashed into her at once. You're wrong, she said softly. I do owe you something. His fingers twitched slightly. What? Elena looked up. The truth. That I lost control too. That I've memorized the way your voice changes when you're tired, the way your eyes soften when you talk about your mother, the way you stand just slightly closer than necessary, like you want more, but don't dare ask. She stepped closer, close enough to touch him. I didn't come here to end it. I came here because I couldn't imagine going forward, pretending anymore. I came here to begin. For the first time since they met, Julian didn't reply with words. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her, not as a statement, not as a move, just as a man finally reaching what he's been too afraid to admit he wants. No script, no flashbulbs, just two people in a room no one else would enter, choosing each other. Not for strategy, not for optics, but because pretending not to feel had become too painful to bear. And as they left that room, still holding hands, no one said anything more. They didn't need to, because for the first time there was no one watching, no target provided, just the two of them, with a clear choice. A year later, Elena's company, Carter & Brand, was now featured on every firm-to-watch list in strategic communications. They had opened 2 new offices, one in Boston, another in Austin. Her team had only doubled in size, but their client base had grown 5-fold. She no longer ran every campaign herself. She chose her projects carefully now. She kept the ones that made her feel something, not just the ones that paid the most. She had learned to trust instinct, not impulsive emotion, but the quiet voice of the heart. As for Julian, he was no longer the ice architect on magazine covers. Cross & Co. had pivoted sharply toward community-focused projects, schools, libraries, public art centers, buildings he once would have dismissed. He started hosting guest lectures for architecture students, often ending with a line that lingered in the room. Emotion doesn't weaken structure, it's what makes it last. They still attended events together, but now no one asked whether they were real, because the way Julian looked at Elena when she walked into a room said more than any press release ever could. The sapphire bracelet still circled her wrist, but next to it was a platinum ring. Simple, elegant, given to her by Julian on a quiet evening with no candles, no grand gestures. Just a soft question. Do you trust it this time? She had said yes. Tanya, Elena's best friend, had once warned her, don't play with fire unless you're ready to get burned. Elena had thought about that often. And then she realized, some fires aren't meant to destroy. They're meant to warm, to light the way, to soften what once was rigid. Julian had once been a concrete fortress, cold, sealed, unyielding. Now he was a space with windows, warmth, and a path that led all the way to the heart, unlocked. One quiet Sunday, they walked along the river. No photographers, no press. Julian handed her a coffee, black, no sugar, but this time with a hint of cinnamon. Trying something new, she asked. No, he replied. You once told me your mother loved the smell of cinnamon in winter. Elena looked at him, quietly moved. That's why she loved him. Not for the big gestures, but for the smallest details, like the first notes he ever wrote. In the end, real love doesn't need a strategy. It doesn't need a script. It just needs the courage to begin and the quiet decision every single day to stay